Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. And this is Dr. Greer, and I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Disclosure Project, and the founder of the OrionProject.org. And we have a really exciting show tonight, program. We're going to go really deep into the concept of mass consciousness and the effect it can have in the world for facilitating universal peace and peaceful contact with the extraterrestrial civilizations that we have proven are visiting Earth. And so I'm very happy to welcome tonight Kosta Makreas. And Kosta, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I want to say a little bit. Kosta's been involved with CSETI for many years, and he's come on a number of the expeditions to Mount Shasta, California, and other places. And he has sort of taken the lead on helping coordinate people from all over the world who are interested in contact and what we call the CE-5 initiative, or the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative. And what that is, for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, is in 1990 when I founded CSETI.org, that's CSETI.org, the purpose, the central and primary purpose of the organization was to facilitate peaceful diplomatic contact with the interstellar extraterrestrial civilizations that are visiting Earth, because this has not been done properly through the United Nations or the State Department or other entities, and I felt it was time that we had a sort of citizens diplomatic effort, and we began to study how people had contact where it was interactive and where they had facilitated the actual contact or actually vectored and invited the ET spacecraft and the ET beings in. And as I began to study this, having had that experience, those of you who've read my book, Hidden Truths, Forbidden Knowledge, which is sort of an autobiography of my journey and how I got to be doing what I'm doing, there was a period when I was about 18 years old where I had an experience where there was contact that was facilitated by me after I had an experience in cosmic consciousness, and I had begun to study the Vedas and the Pujas and the whole concept of higher states of consciousness, and I began to experiment with higher states of consciousness where you could actually, by remaining in your body but expanding your consciousness, and see deep space, and then see the extraterrestrial worlds or civilizations or their spacecraft, and then connect to their communication systems and guide them into where we're located. Because what I discovered is that the transdimensional and interdimensional technologies that, by definition, any civilization going faster than the speed of light has to use are technologies that are actually physical devices that interface with clear, what I call coherent thought, sort of like laser light is coherent light, where all the wavelength is the same, synced up. This is thought and imaging coming from an expanded, clear state of flow consciousness. And basically, once one feels the presence or sees in their inner third eye in some place, it can be somewhere around the Earth, it can be in deep space, it can be in another galaxy, an extraterrestrial civilization, you can connect to their communication systems and then show them, and instead of just viewing them passively, show them where we're located. And then using what we call coherent thought sequencing, which is the use of the mind and thought to guide them in from, let's say if there was a spacecraft out near Saturn, and we know from the Lockheed Martin witness we have that we've imaged some massive extraterrestrial spacecraft out near the rings of Saturn that have come through the classified projects. Well, let's say that you see in your inner sight this craft. By practicing higher states of consciousness, meditation, remote viewing, you can then connect to the beings and invite them in a state of universal peace, and acknowledging that the state of consciousness, pure mind, is a universal field that we're all united and one through. And connecting at that very, very deep cosmic consciousness level, then show them where you're located. So let's say that you're in someplace in California. Let's pick a place, Mount Shasta. You would show them our planet Earth. You would show them North America. Then you would zoom in and show them the west coast of North America. And you would then come into the northern California area and to the volcanic range there near the Oregon border, show them Mount Shasta, and then show them down to literally a few square meters of where you're located. Because when it's in that state of higher consciousness and expanded mind, the thought emanating from that level is very powerful. And when you actually connect with these extraterrestrial civilizations and these people, their not only innate ability to receive it is very high, but they have technologies that interface with consciousness. And back in 1991, I wrote a paper about this where I described technology-assisted consciousness, where there are technological systems that actually assist consciousness and remote viewing and communication. But there are also technologies which I call consciousness-assisted technology, where the mind actually directs the machine. And actually most people who've had contact with these extraterrestrial beings and been on board their craft will report that frequently they will see these beings just sitting with their hands on a console and then thinking and seeing with their mind, and that the craft will go as they direct it in that fashion. So this makes sense if you think about the fact that a civilization that can go faster than the speed of light and get here from thousands of light years or hundreds of light years away, the only way they could get here would be to drop out of linear space-time and begin to understand these other dimensions, the world of thought, the world of mind, the world of what the mystics used to call the astral energy, the etheric energy. And, of course, this is where understanding, of course, everyone listening to the World Puja Network understands the science of consciousness very well, and this is why I like going in very deeply into these issues on this program. Unlike most of the programs, I was recently interviewed by the Australian Broadcasting Company, and I couldn't talk about any of this really. But on this program, we can really talk about this. So all of you listening understand the fundamental nature of mind, and that is that the conscious mind whereby we are all awake right now is actually a singularity, that there's not my mind and Kosta's mind and someone else's mind. We have our individualities, but there's this a sun of unbounded mind, this sort of unbounded, infinite field of pure consciousness that is the root source of all of our awareness. And so by going into deep states of meditation and understanding the Sanskrit Vedas and the meditation that we teach at CSETI, what people have learned to do is then expand awareness and then remotely view with their inner sight these extraterrestrial civilizations or people or their spacecraft and then guide them in. And this is called a close encounter of the fifth kind. Now, there are other ways that people have had close encounters of the fifth kind. For example, there are many accounts in the literature, and Dr. Richard Haynes at NASA did a book at my suggestion back some years ago called CE-5 for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, where I helped him put together cases, and he found many on his own where people would be, for example, just out someplace, and suddenly they would see a UFO or an ET spacecraft, and they would have a flashlight with them, and they would signal to it, and the craft would come back and signal back to them. Or they would just think to it, oh, I wish you would move to the right so I can see you better, and would move to the right. And they wouldn't have said anything. And then they would say, oh, my gosh, it's like they read my mind. And then they would think, oh, I hope it moves to the left. And they'd think that, and it would move to the left or up and down. There are literally hundreds of cases like this. And this is what I began to discover. That the experience I had as an 18-year-old boy, young man, was not that unusual. It just wasn't talked about. And that it really had within it the central message of civilizations that are developed enough to travel faster than the speed of light, who are already involved with the Earth or concerned about the Earth. They understand the science of consciousness. They understand the ancient Vedic Sanskrit wisdom, because it's not only understood, it's practiced even on a level of their technology. And this is what's fascinating. So I think that this understanding is part of what we want to share. And then the other part of it is that, and Dr. John at Princeton Engineering Anomalies Lab, Research Lab, the Peer Lab, found that if one person, for example, puts their mind on a random number generator or a robot, it will actually have an effect on that physical thing, even though they're not touching it or there's no material, quote-unquote, physical, normal contact. If there are two people who are in a state of unity or love each other, that effect isn't twice as much. It's exponential. It's 10 times greater or 20 times greater. And so what we found through doing this work with the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and training people to do this is that when there are groups of people who are in this state, this harmonic of pure consciousness and making contact for a very clear purpose of peaceful contact. We're not doing it to try to steal their technology. We're not there to dominate them. We're not doing it out of fear or prejudice or any of the things that are usually talked about in the UFO circuit. We're doing it very directly to establish peaceful contact, and the foundation for that is universal peace, which emanates from this state of universal pure consciousness. So that's the basis of what we do. And actually these training expeditions that we conduct, we spend the whole week going through this information, training people in meditation, training people in remote viewing, and then going out every night under the stars, experimenting with this protocol, and we are never disappointed. We literally have had hundreds and hundreds of events where we have had contact in all sorts of ways with extraterrestrial civilizations. And it comes in many ways. Sometimes it'll be an actual craft that will be seen. Sometimes it'll be an object or a light that will appear in the circle. Other times it will be beings that will appear near us. It may be electronic tones. We have electronic detectors, magnetometers, things of this sort that are out there with us that they will begin to communicate through, even though you can't see anything. There are literally hundreds of ways that these extraterrestrial civilizations make this contact. And so we've sort of put this in sort of a summary of all our research experiences in a new book that came out last year called Contact, Countdown to Transformation. And it has with it a DVD that actually goes through and shows some of the images of the contact we've had starting back in the early 90s up through 2009, I believe. And it actually has with it the tones that we also use, because one of the protocols we use is not just using the consciousness and thought and high-powered lasers and lights to send up into space, but we also use some electronic tones that were recorded at a CSETI gathering at Mount Shasta, where we had an extraterrestrial tone come through the group. And when people heard the tone, we were in a meditative state, almost everyone saw a spherical ET craft and that moved through the group like a string of pearls. That's one tone that is on this DVD. Another tone is what Colin Andrews, who coined the term crop circle, was able to get from a contact that happened in a crop circle in England back in 1989, now 22 years ago, and that was recorded by the BBC when they were there. That is a very interesting tone, and we have since recorded many other tones that have come from trans-dimensional space-time right near us in the center of our contact group. So we also project those out into space using both just like a boom box, but also with radio receivers where we're sending it out on an electromagnetic spectrum. So these three protocols, the tones, the laser lights, and the consciousness, are being used at the same time when we're out under the stars to invite the ETs to come and visit us in whatever way that they deem safe and appropriate at that time and place, and that's appropriate for the group. So that is really the foundation of what we're doing. Now, having done this introduction now for the last 10 or 15 minutes, what I really want Kosta to share, and Kosta, you can go into this in some detail, is sort of the worldwide effort you're heading up to, and we're inviting people who are listening to this show on the World Puja Network to join this network, to do these meditations and contact events with us on some regular scheduled basis that you're helping facilitate.
Yes, I would love to go into some detail about that. Starting last October 2010, it occurred to me that with so many of the groups out worldwide that you had trained, through your ambassador training programs, they were maybe out there in an isolated way, using the protocols and having experiences. But I had the thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow we could all coordinate, find each other, and choose a time. In this case, I chose a 24-hour period, usually a Saturday, to make it convenient for people. Choose such a time where we could all come together as a kind of a united group, not just a singular, isolated group, but as a larger entity, representative of humanity that would love to approach these stellar civilizations. So I set about contacting people through the mailing list that CSETI had obviously built up of these groups, and found that there was a real interest, that the people wanted to feel more connected with community and wanted just to see as an experiment what could eventuate if we all got together in a larger, more synergistic way. So back in October then, we chose the first Saturday, I think it was the 5th, October 5th, and it was near a new moon, so that in places where the weather was hospitable enough, people could go outside and have a reasonably dark sky. We chose that 24-hour period and asked people in their own local time zone from 1 midnight of Friday, Saturday night, to the following midnight of Saturday, Sunday, anytime they could get together with their group to do so, whether indoors or outdoors. And then I had published a list to all those that were going to participate, just telling them where the other locations were so they could kind of get a sense that these were real groups and real locations, not just something abstract. And so people like that,
right,
having that geographical knowledge, and they would then connect heart to heart and do the protocols as Dr. Greer here has outlined, over the years and through various means, and see what would happen. And I really wasn't sure what to expect. I thought, if not much comes back, maybe we'll try it one more time. And if a lot more reports come back and people are enthused about it, this is something that we can continue to build on and make it bigger and bigger. Well, fortunately, it was the latter, where those first groups, I think we first had about 40, maybe in half a dozen countries. The reports came back with people detailing their narratives, their experiences, and it was clear that they wanted to continue. So every month since then, and I think we've just finished our 7th one this last April 2nd, it has been growing as people have been finding each other and adding to our list, to the point where I think we hit a maximum of about 128 of these groups in more than 20 countries.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
And it just lets you know that people all over the world have been listening and paying attention to your book, Steve, because they're obviously responding to the groundwork that you laid there and feeling a sense of participation now that they have friends, people in other countries that they can do this with and not feel so isolated. For example, we've got people, I'll just read just a short list, in Canada, Romania, New Zealand, Italy, England, Portugal, Bulgaria, Japan, Brazil, Sweden, Germany, and multiple places in the U.S., as well as a few more, and it's growing all the time. So basically that's how it works. It's a very simple thing, but it's also very, very powerful because we're all synergizing, thinking of each other, connecting heart to heart, and then asking the star civilizations that are visiting here to approach us in our own unique way in our locale and in the many different ways that they are capable of doing this, as you were just outlining.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of people who have had some amazing experiences and sightings and events that have happened in conjunction with doing this synergistically.
I've lost track of all the wonderful ones. I've got them all written down somewhere, but I'll tell you, they've been all over the map, starting from people sighting, scores, a fleet of UFOs heading over Staten Island, for example, heading towards New Jersey. I got a report more than once of that. To people near where the nuclear reactors are in Japan, for example, and being able to signal to vehicles that were local there, and were signaling back in a very intelligent and coherent kind of way, and also responding to people's thoughts. So that was another powerful experience for that particular group, because some of the thoughts they tell me they were sending were prayers out into space for those who had lost their lives or their property in the recent catastrophic events there in Japan. And it was a very moving thing for them to have the signaling come back to them and an acknowledgement of these loving, prayerful thoughts that they had sent out.
Right.
So this is what keeps people coming back. These are heartfelt kind of experiences that you can't make up, and that really touch you and make you want to come back and keep exploring.
Well, and the other thing is the people who have studied Rupert Sheldrake's work and the whole concept of morphogenic fields is that once a certain number of people, sort of a critical mass of people, begin to do something, the concept begins to proliferate non-locally and non-linearly, meaning that it's sort of like the 100th monkey phenomenon, where they found that once a group of monkeys on an island that's isolated from other islands begins to learn a certain social skill or technical skill, groups of monkeys on other islands that aren't connected to them by seeing them or communicating directly spontaneously begin to do the same thing. So there is this organizing unity state of awareness that is actually permeates all of existence. And the saying that all of this is that everything is literally conscious, and consciousness manifesting as a photon or a star or a being or a person, but that it's not in a broken up, fragmented way. It's in this unitive state. It's like Erwin Schrödinger, who was the father of modern quantum mechanics and particle wave theory back in, I believe, 1908, said the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, it is a singularity. That mind itself is a singularity. It is that state of oneness. And, of course, everyone on the World Puja Network understands that the meditative practices, the pranayama, the breathing practices, all these things, that when we teach these on these week-long expeditions, lead people into that unitive state of consciousness, an expanded state of awareness. But in doing so, when it's one person, it has a certain effect, but when it's hundreds of people, it has a greatly exponential effect. And we think this is really important because not only is it letting the ETs know that there are enlightened people on this planet who aspire to peaceful contact with them, in stark contrast with the military-industrial complex, which have been shooting them down and trying to capture them and studying their technologies for materialistic purposes. And that showing that good side of humanity to these visitors is a very, very important thing to do and to even contemplate, and that it creates this morphogenic field that then potentiates a future unfolding of world peace and universal peace rather than, like the movies in Hollywood, interplanetary war or Star Wars. So I think that people understanding the power of mind and consciousness, particularly when we work together, the old saying, God loves those who work together, that there is this very powerful effect that is not just additive, it's an exponential effect. And actually, as I mentioned, when I spoke to Dr. John at Princeton about this, he said, yeah, that has actually been proven scientifically that is the case. So this is really, really exciting, sort of new step, a new layer, as it were, of the whole CE-5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, which has been building over the last 20 years. But in the last 2 or 3 years, and people on the show have heard me talk about this, has taken off exponentially frickin' believable. I mean, we're going to do a show fairly soon with a man who's on our team who's been doing some of the photography, and we'll have some of these images up on our website at CSETI.org when we do this show. But what happened about a month ago when we were, for example, in Florida on Marco Island, we literally had a transdimensional interstellar flotilla, like a city, that emerged out of space-time over the Gulf of Mexico, that was seen by everybody on this whole expedition. And it was there in one form or another, being videotaped and photographed for 3 hours. It's stunning, unbelievable. So what we're finding is that everything is evolving, and that even though Hillary Clinton doesn't have a project reaching out to these interstellar civilizations, and the UN hasn't taken it up, that it hasn't reached the point where the body, where the sort of hidebound diplomatic corps has done this yet. They are watching what we're doing, and there are major countries around the world that have inquired about what we're doing and how we're doing it and what results we're having. So this is actually having that effect of turning the world situation, which has got to happen, because, ultimately, the old saying, power abhors a vacuum. And when good people do nothing, people who have other agendas will step in with those agendas. And we think it's very, very important for people who understand what the good future is that awaits the Earth, a future of new technologies, free energy, so-called free energy, energy from the zero-point energy field, interstellar travel and peaceful relations with these civilizations, world peace, the elimination of poverty on this planet. These are all things tied into what we're working on, and it isn't going to happen by just people wishing it were so. That's part of it. But you actually are doing something when you're out there making contact with a group of people. And you don't have to be on, with 20 or 30 people. You can be with, 3 or 4 or 5 people. And we also, I just wanted to mention this, one of the things that's potentiating this is that there are hundreds of people now who have downloaded from the App Store, the iPhone and iPod App Store, the CSETI app. And so you can go there, and it actually has the entire meditation CD on it. It has the remote viewing training. It has images, and it actually has a program that you can download that turns your iPhone into a magnetometer, which is a magnetic field meter that has a sound, beeping sound, and a needle that shows when there's an extraterrestrial vehicle that's approaching that affects the magnetic field. And it describes all the protocols in as much as you can do in an app. I mean, it's not like coming out for a week with our team, but it's a very, very good program. And also now at disclosureproject.org, there is a entire training program that you can get that has even much more information. So these are things that you can get even if you cannot come on these week-long expeditions, which is really, of course, the gold standard where you really get a sense of this. And, I just want to mention we're going to be in Crestone, Colorado from June 23rd to June 30th with a group. It's in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in the San Luis, the so-called Mysterious Valley, San Luis Valley, where we've had so much contact over the years. And then we're going to be in the crop circles in England doing a study of the crop circles and a tour of all the sacred places in England, and also every night going out under the stars or the clouds, as it may be in England. But we're going to be there from July 24th to the 31st for those of you who want to join us there. It's going to be an amazing expedition. Last year when we were there, we had really extraordinary contact, even in broad daylight. And some of the photographs that were taken from those events during the day are positive, amazing. And then in California, we're going to be at Mount Shasta again, August 21st to the 27th, and then we're going to be in the Joshua Tree area, wilderness of California, October 23rd through October 29th. And the information on all those is at CSETI.org, CSETI.org. So But if you can't make one of these week-long expeditions, then, one of the things you can do if you have an iPhone or iPad is to download the whole protocol and training approach on your iPhone at the App Store, at the Apple App Store, or you can get the entire training kit at disclosureproject.org. So these are things that you can do to learn more about this so that you have a really deep foundation, and then you can hook up with Kosta's group on these regularly planned synchronized close encounters of the fifth kind around the world. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to underscore what you were just saying, Steve, that our group seeks to grow in quality as well as in quantity, and in order to find out how we can cooperate with these civilizations. Well, we know they're here to help, and we know that it makes them joyous when they discover human beings who really do want peace and want to cooperate with them. So one of the fundamental things that we stress in our approach every month is how can we cooperate with you? How can we work together? And every person can voice that in their own way, but the spirit is the same. It's one of cooperation, of love, of joy, and that's what really elevates all of this. It's wonderful to see them in the skies or among us in our groups. Sometimes they'll touch us, sometimes we'll hear tones, and they'll communicate in so many of the ways that you mentioned, Steve. But the important thing is that at the end of the day is that we're really establishing new interstellar relations. We're
right.
building our family, and it's really about finding ways that we can work together so that universal peace can be established on Earth, so that we can, reach this tipping point and enter into that rather than the paradigm that we have been having. So, in a sense, this is very pioneering. It started with the project you established so many years ago, and now I think a lot of people are turned on to this and want to participate more and more. So, with all these tools that you have, like at the App Store and the new training material, there's nothing that holds anybody back from having the tools and the information they need to make their own contact and then to join our community if they want to do that every month. We certainly welcome a respectful, sincere, and spiritual approach from people.
And one of the central things that we train people in on these week-long expeditions is I literally do a puja at least once and sometimes 2 or 3 times during the week and initiate people into mantra meditation and other remote viewing techniques that facilitate this state of oneness and the expansion of consciousness. And frankly, they're very, very effective. And one of it's interesting because many people don't understand what is the connection between this state of awareness and enlightenment and contact with these interstellar civilizations. I say, well, it's actually the root of it. It's the actual basis for this kind of contact. And this has been known all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, the ancient people of Peru, the people who understood the star people in the Dogon tribe in Africa. I mean, this has been known for a very, very long time, and all the shamans. And what has been lost in modern science is the understanding that there are civilizations that are technologically hundreds of thousands to literally millions of years ahead of ours, but the basis for their very advanced technologies is this consciousness-assisted technology and technology that assists consciousness and the science of awareness and consciousness, which is actually understood in Vedanta and the Vedas and the science of consciousness and the traditions that exist in civilizations all over the world, actually. So one of the key things that is involved in this is the development of these states of consciousness and understanding that this isn't something that some guru in a cave can do, that every human being that is awake and conscious, every sentient being, has folded within them the entirety of this cosmic being, and that by going into these quiet states of awareness and then learning to function in a deep state of consciousness in remote view deep space and make contact, that we're actually exercising something that is essential to our nature. It isn't something that is foreign or even difficult, really. There are techniques and there are things that facilitate it, but in reality, every sentient being in the cosmos has the ability to be aware of the mind itself, to know the mind, and in that silence go through the doorway of that infinite mind and see any place in space or time. So this is the foundation of interstellar travel, interstellar communication. And, I tell this hilarious story of back when Clinton was president, of briefing his CIA director on this matter. And the President Clinton and the CIA director had been denied access to the classified projects that were going on. And so I was invited to go up to Washington. At the time, I was working as a emergency doctor full time, and I, made time to go up with my wife, and we had a meeting. The cover story for the meeting was a dinner party at a private home, and when we got there, I started going through this material with the CIA director, and after about 10 minutes, about, just the government documents and all the disclosure project type information, and he says, yes, I know these are real. I don't know why they're hiding this from me. And I said, well, there are a lot of reasons, but the central reason is it's a huge paradigm shift. And over dinner, his wife, the CIA director's wife, Woolsey, R. James Woolsey's wife, Dr. Sue Woolsey, who is the head of the Chief Operating Officer of the National Academy of Sciences, at one point looked at me very seriously and said, Dr. Greer, what I want to understand is how are they communicating across the vastness of interstellar space? And I thought to myself, now at that point for several years, we'd already been going around making this kind of contact, and I thought, well, God, do I tell her the truth and lose all credibility as a scientist, or do I make up something that sounds scientific but is really nonsense? And I said, no, I'm going to tell her the truth, even though I run the risk of losing all credibility. So I told her that any civilization that can go from another star system to here have mastered the sciences of transdimensional technologies that interface with thought and consciousness, and that the speed of light, here we are talking on telephones and cell phones, and those are moving at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles a second. But if you're from a star system only 1,000 light years from Earth, which is only 1% of the way through the Milky Way galaxy. A light year is a measure of distance, and it's how far a beam of light will travel in a year, going 186,000 miles every second per year. That's 1 light year. The Milky Way galaxy, our home galaxy, is 100,000 of those light years across. So let's say you're from a fairly nearby star system that's 1,000 light years away. Never mind other galaxies. The nearest galaxy is Andromeda. It's 2.5 million light years. But let's just say you're 1,000 light years away. If you were restricted to using an AT&T cell phone or a fiber optic system or something that travels at the speed of light, for you to communicate to your spacecraft at Earth from your home planet would take 1,000 years for the message, hello, how are you today, to get to them. And then for them to reply and say, I'm doing fine, how are you? That just took another 1,000 years. So it's the time since the birth of Christ to say, hello, how are you? Fine, thank you very much, at the speed of light. And therefore, a priori, by definition, any civilization that's here, and we can prove they're here, go to disclosureproject.org and see all the evidence. What that means is they're using a whole new paradigm of science, technology, consciousness, electromagnetics that are multidimensional, transdimensional, that drop out of linear space-time and traverse these dimensions of the astral and thought and consciousness. So studying this and mastering this it isn't as if that's a sideshow to understanding the whole extraterrestrial presence. It's the essential science. And that's why it's so exciting at the World Puja Network that there's so many people that we've met over the years who have come to these expeditions and that I've met at other conferences and things who understand these principles. Because if you understand the principles of consciousness and non-locality and omnipresence and how thought and consciousness can interface with very advanced electromagnetic systems, which is what we're talking about in the case of these extraterrestrial civilizations, then you really have gone a long way to be able to function as an ambassador of peace from Earth to their people. And so that's why and so when I began to explain this to the CIA director's wife, and I wasn't sure how she would react. I thought, oh my God, she's going to throw me out of the house. And after I explained this, she looked at me and she says, I thought it had to be something like that. She didn't miss a beat. She just absolutely, I think people are ready for the truth. I think people are ready to know that we live in a multiverse, a trans-dimensional cosmos that is essentially conscious and awake, and that there are ways that we can use that knowledge to make contact with these civilizations, create this morphogenic field of peaceful concepts of universal peace, rather than us versus them sort of Manichaean craziness. And I think that this is why it's so exciting what you're doing, Kosta, is that you're really facilitating all these people and groups that have been trained over the years all over the world. I mean, the people have come to these expeditions from Russia and Sweden and Malaysia and South Africa and Brazil and everywhere. But this is a wonderful thing that you're doing, I think. I want to thank you for hooking all these people up, because I would never have time to deal with it. But I'm so glad you're doing it as a volunteer. And
yeah, well, you're welcome. And the thing is, none of this would be happening if you had absolutely not just laid the groundwork over the years, preparing the ground so that all these groups could become interested, and then someone like me could, come along and say, hey, let's organize another level further. It's just wonderful teamwork. And again, it would not have been possible if you hadn't done all the foundational work that is now allowing people to step in and add their efforts and just exponentially multiply what your efforts were. So it's like you have spawned this wonderful, rippling, synergistic, exponential movement as more and more people start joining us every month that will have no limit. It's literally the sky. Well, the sky's not the limit.
Exactly.
I like to say.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah, I want to thank you for preparing the way.
Well, and what's also exciting is that we're even learning how to set up, for example, with the new very sensitive digital photography that have these sensors. We're actually learning how to image trans-dimensional extraterrestrial beings, people, craft that we may only see an aspect of them in our dimension, but these abilities to film them, and this is what's on this DVD that is with this new book. But since that came out, in the last year and a half, there's actually been an exponential growth. I mean, literally a quadrupling of the level of contact. I mean, we can barely keep up with it. I mean, because we're all working as volunteers. But what's exciting is that we found out that there are dozens of these objects that were filmed at Marco Island last month while this amazing event was taking place. That we were at Crestone last year in June or July, and we were at this contact site at the what's called Blanca Peak. It's the sacred mountain of the East for the Native American tribes of that part of the United States. It's the third highest peak in Colorado, and we go up there every year. And we were at this sacred contact site, and literally we had someone there with a digital video camera that also had a night scope, and a triangular craft came in, object right there on the site and flashed into view just very quickly, but it's actually on the videotape, and it blipped into linear space-time reality and then vanished. But when you freeze it, you see, and it looks exactly like the CSETI logo, which is a equilateral triangle, which is based on an experiment we did in the crop circles some years ago, where we actually went up. What we're going to do in England this year, just so people know, there's an 1,800-acre farm. It's part of the Royal Trust lands, actually, but the man who is the farmer for that land has been very supportive over the years for the work that Colin Andrews and Crop Circle fame and our group have been doing, and Colin Andrews and I have been working together for many years, since the early 90s. And in the center of this farm is this beautiful high hill that we can work on, and he's going to let us go there with this group this summer. But when we were there the very first year in 1992, we actually went up there with about a dozen people, and we mentally projected a specific crop circle to the ETs and asked if they could put it in a field somewhere nearby. And what we projected mentally was, if you go to CSETI.org, you'll see the logo, and it's an equilateral triangle, and precisely, that crop circle appeared the next morning in a farmer's field within line sight of where we were, not too far from where we were located. And this was something that was so astonishing because it was a crop circle CE-5. It was a close encounter of the fifth kind involving the agroglyphs or crop circles. And so there's so many ways that these civilizations will interact. Now, many people say, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? I said, well, unfortunately, first of all, they'd be blown out of the sky. Secondly, whose White House? The White House in Columbia, and the White House, the Élysée Palace. I mean, this is sort of a fundamental question. But more importantly, they're wanting to make contact with people who are understand transdimensional conscious reality, where consciousness and matter and electromagnetism and space and time all come together. And this is what we're exploring, and this is what we're unraveling. But we've learned now how to utilize these very advanced new cameras, in both still and video, to get these amazing images, and it's just been going up exponentially. So we'll be sharing more and more of those.
Speaking of the genesis of that crop circle that you were mentioning, where it appeared, and the CSETI logo was born, as an experiment in our second or third monthly global CE-5 experiment that we've been talking about, I suggested to the group that just as an experiment, we put out the thought during our link-up together that any ET craft that could, to show us the CSETI logo, to show us a triangular formation in some manner, whether it was a visual in someone's mind, or maybe something in the sky, or something close by in a circle where people were gathered, in some fashion, just to see what kind of interaction we would get back. And I'll tell you, I must have had at least a half a dozen reports, mine included, of different kinds of sightings where actual triangles were formed and manifested in the sky, and in some cases they wound up on television. And the people who filmed them obviously didn't know the kind of the backstory about why they were showing a triangle, but it was just part of a sighting that happened in their local city, and they were showing it to their viewers. But there it was,
right.
And it was just a real thrill to see that in this very deliberate fashion, our reports came back with examples of craft that were seen in the sky in a triangular formation moving along,
right,
in different places. That was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it is, and this is not a coincidence, actually, because we've had this happen over and over and over again. And it's interesting because the mantra that I teach actually has a tonality to it that makes a triangle. And when it begins to evolve, it actually begins to create a Merkaba. And the contact event that happened, one of the things I'm teaching now, even since you were last on one of these trainings, Kosta, is using this mantra. I do a puja in the center of the circle, and using this mantra and developing it into a double tetrahedron a Merkaba, that is moving in a certain way, and that becomes a carrier vehicle for us to expand our awareness out into space and then invite the ETs back. And when we did this at Marco Island, at the completion of that meditation, that's when this big 3-hour contact event took place.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And so that's one. We're hoping to do a recording of that soon. And so these things keep unfolding and developing over time. And everyone who understands what a mantra is the sound component of a thought, of Sanskrit thought or word. And what I discovered, because I've been a meditation teacher since 1975, I hate to admit how long. It predates when I was before I went to medical school or anything. But what I found was that over the years, if you've ever heard a puja, and I do a puja at these trainings for people, you will notice that it has a tonality and sort of a chanting quality to it. But the mantras, for years that had been taught and shared, had lost the tonality. So if it was a 3-syllable mantra, it was just da-da-da. Well, what I discovered is that when we were in Colorado 3 or 4 years ago, we went to this Zen Dome, meditation dome that's in Colorado in Crestone, that we'll be taking everyone to this year in June when we go. And we did this God consciousness meditation in there, and afterwards I went to meditate privately back at my the house I was staying in, and I went into a state of samadhi, deep, pure, unbounded mind. And then as I began very subtly emerging from it, I began to hear this tonality. And it was a specific tone. Da, 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 da. And it was interesting because the first note was a perfect fifth higher than the other two. And they made a triangle. And then it became this mantra. And I realized, good God, this tonality is an essential part of the Vedic puja tradition of these mantras that have been lost for thousands of years. So now that's what we're sharing. And there is a meditation CD that has this mantra on it and instruction in how to use it. So this is, something that continues to unfold, and now we're discovering where that's creating, as it's used in a specific way, this double tetrahedron that becomes a carrier vehicle for all of us to go into space, see the ET vehicles and peoples and planets, and then invite them back to where we're making contact. And when we did that, now I have to say, we did it immediately after I did a puja in this very center of our circle out on the beach on Marco Island. So we'll be doing that in Colorado, in Crestone in June, and of course we'll be doing it in crop circles. I'm actually going to be doing the puja in the crop circles in England, so it'll be a wonderful experience. And it just continues to unfold. And what we find is that as it continues to unfold and contact becomes more intimate and more demonstrative, we also, find that there's a lot of interest in certain military quarters who want to stop it, but they can't stop it. What we found at Marco Island was that this was beyond anything they could do to stop it. It was amazing. And so what I tell people is that we're at a time where the yuga, the old cycle for the last 400 and some thousand years, is closing. And there's an age of enlightenment opening. And we're at this point of emergence. And these interstellar civilizations that are highly enlightened certainly understand that. They know that, and it's not just Earth, it's a universal cycle that's open. That's another 500,000 year or so cycle. And this is the cycle when all of Earth and all of humanity will be in a state of peace and enlightenment and using extremely life-supporting and earth-protecting technologies rather than nuclear power plants and coal and oil and garbage like that. And so the ETs know that. Now, like any enlightened people, they know that they can't just land on Earth and force this change. But by connecting with us and us understanding the future and understanding the future pours and manifests through us, we can then become the bridge from the old time into this new age of enlightenment. And that is really what we're doing on an interstellar level, where the interstellar civilizations are working with us and assisting us and protecting and guiding. But really, the prime movers are those of us, the children of Earth, because it has to happen that way. I mean, it's like, invading Afghanistan and thinking that we're going to force Jeffersonian democracy on a feudal society. It just doesn't happen that way. It has to happen from inside. It has to be organic. It has to be real. And they understand that. And this is why many people say, well, gee, why don't they just land at the nuclear power plant in Japan and fix all that? I said, well, first of all, they'd be blown out of the sky by our space-based weapons that we have. Secondly, they understand that we have lessons to learn. Now, I will say that as the world becomes more unstable, both geophysically and geopolitically, they're very concerned about it. And they know there's only so much time we have to keep mucking up the world, because ultimately, you can't have 7 billion people using fossil fuels and nuclear power, destroying all life on Earth and making thousands of species of life extinct. And that's what's happened in the last 50 or 100 years. So they understand that, and that's why we're at this critical juncture. And that's why it's also very important to understand that people need to learn how to make contact with these civilizations as things evolve, because you can't judge the future by looking in your rearview mirror, because it's a whole new civilization unfolding. And we have to be forward-looking. We have to understand the past. We have to understand the present realistically, and not with rose-colored Pollyannish glasses on. But what we really have to understand is this age of enlightenment that's unfolding and coming through us as we work with these civilizations, with higher states of consciousness, and also with other dimensions, whether it be the angelic realm and the celestial realm. This is all part and parcel of the same reality of the conscious universe. And this is an essential part of what we teach, because there's no point in going into a reductionist thing where, it's humans and ETs and there's nothing else there. Well, there's a lot else there, but it's all working together. And so what you find is that it's sort of like where all of this comes together in this understanding, and once that holistic understanding is attained, that's when maximum contact can happen. And I think it's because not only is it technically needed, but the ETs are looking to have this kind of contact with people who understand all the ways that they can manifest and all the ways that we as humans will be manifesting this future.
I think it gives them just as much joy when they connect with those of us who do want to cooperate peacefully as it does for us to see, sense their presence, and to connect in a very loving way with them. It really is a very mutual thing. And if there's one thing that I get over and over in the reports every month from our various worldwide groups, it's always the sense that people tell me they feel loved, that they have felt the presence of the ETs literally in their circles sometimes,
right,
or nearby or in the skies, and that has just thrilled them. And the messages sometimes they get telepathically are of a symmetrical nature, where the thrill is also coming from the other side. So this is a wonderful virtuous circle, I guess,
right,
or loop, I should say.
Yeah, loop,
that
right.
is benefiting everybody and creating, like you say, Steve, a new potential for the Earth, another pathway of peace that may not have been there before. And this is a powerful field, and we certainly welcome people to come help build it with us.
Indeed. Well, we're about out of time. I'd like to thank you, Kosta, for all your fantastic work in organizing folks, and those of you who want to join us on these monthly coordinated meditations and contact experiences. You can go to CSETI.org and find out about that. Also, the schedule for these upcoming expeditions under the stars and meditation training programs are there at cseti.org. If you need to find out more about Disclosure Project, you can see disclosureproject.org has a place where you can order these training materials and the books and the CDs. And those of you interested in the technologies of new energy that can free us from the economic slavery of oil and gas and nuclear power and coal, you can go to the orionproject.org. So feel free to go there and investigate what we're doing. And I'd like to thank you, Kosta, for being with us today on this show. And
you're welcome.
And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us every 2 weeks. It's really wonderful to have an opportunity to speak to a community of really enlightened people who are involved with the World Puja Network. So God bless all of you, and until next time, keep looking up. Bye-bye.